It's 9:02. Let's go ahead and turn it on. We're good? All right. We've got 4 public comment cards and a 5th coming. Give it to our clerk here.
Thank you.
Mr. Sachs, you have a lot to say this morning, yes?
A little bit to say, yes.
Thank you. All right. This is a meeting of the Jobs and Business Development Committee of the Los Angeles City Council. It is the day after Valentine's Day. I hope everybody had a good Valentine's Day. It's February 15th, 2013. We do not expect Mr. Parks today, but I do believe Mr. LaBonge will be joining us. I'm Council Member Eric Garcetti, the chair of the committee, and we do have 3 items on today's agenda. I'm going to hold number 1 first, and if we can go in reverse order, let's start with number 3.
Item number 3 is the CDD and WIB joint report relative to the acceptance of an additional $810,616 in WIA Rapid Response Funds from the State of California Employment Development Department and to amend existing agreement with 18 work source centers in Los Angeles to serve additional dislocated workers.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Always good news, huh? We're coming in with money.
Exactly.
Mr. Chair, I'm Greg Irish. I'm the interim general manager of CDD. I'm joined by Jaime Pacheco, who runs the operations division. We're pleased to announce that we're asking to accept an additional $810,616 in rapid response funds for workforce development activities. We distributed an initial amount of funding to our work source centers to deal with unemployed workers. This will increase the grand total that was going out to the work source centers to $1.8 million. Again, it went through the WIB. The WIB has authorized us to present this to you. It's accepting additional grant funding dollars that will be distributed to work source centers to render those services. Jaime, do you want to add anything to that?
Typically with rapid response funds, we're only allowed to do certain kinds of activities to employers who are laying off employees. With these additional funds, we can actually use the dollars for training services. So we've dedicated the bulk of the money for training to our workforce center providers.
Were these formula funds, or were they competitive?
No, rapid response funds are not formula funds.
Okay. So they came through the state, though, or directly from feds?
From the state.
From the state. This is through the
So
state.
how was it determined this amount? Did we put in an application? There's an additional RFP that went out, or not RFP, but additional pool of funds?
It was allocated by formula. This is part of the governor's
So
discretionary
it is formula.
It was part of the governor's discretionary fund that was recaptured as part of the Department of Labor's instructions. So the state had to release these additional funds that it was holding, took it out of the competitive pool and made it available to the local workforce investment area.
Okay. So each just by the formula population in the state. Okay.
Each jurisdiction.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Sachs has a card on number 3. Do you want to come forward on Mr.? You can sit over right there.
Take the next one.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, was going to combine 2 and 3 just because I believe you asked about state or federal money, because 2 refers to federal funds, the National Emergency Grant Fund, and a couple things. This is the Community Development Department. Back in January of this past year, you were pushing for a new economic development agency, and you would think that's going to actually take up the reins for the CRA, which is more community redevelopment. So you would think that a community development department would be more in tune with following up on the CRA end, and the economic development agency would be more in tune with following up on economic policies here. It's a little bit confusing, the titles of the committees and their focus that they're pushing towards. I was just, pretty much that's what I wanted to ask about, those 2 things. Are there any parameters, because one is federal and one is state, that they're directed at, or is it basically money given to the state? And is this an ongoing yearly source of income for the Workforce Investment Board to look forward to? Do they get this on a yearly basis? Is it prorated out from the state? Is based on the state's, we don't know, magical budget numbers? This year there's excess funds. Does that mean next year they get more money? Do we wait for the rabbit to come out of the hat and find out, oops, we don't get more money? How is that planned out on a regular basis for these A and B, the workforce investment boards and the service centers that the city uses? And one more quick thing, county, this mentions city, Los Angeles workforce centers.
Yep.
Are there county workforce centers and they would get a different package of funding? And
Okay.
if that's so, I would just appreciate that information.
Thank you for your comments. In the most direct way, these are funds that come through the federal government. They sometimes come through the state, and they sometimes come directly to us. We are dependent on what the federal government passes and authorizes each year for the level of that. And yes, there are county workforce centers as well, and we have in the past collaborated between city and county. We certainly serve people outside the city, and our city ones and county ones serve city people and theirs as well. All right, so with that, I will go ahead and approve number 3. And we had opened up public comment on number 2, so we'll close public comment on number 2 as well. If we can hear about number 2.
Yes, and you know this very well, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you know this in your sleep, the way you explained it. Again, we're asking for acceptance of an additional $500,000 of workforce national emergency grant funds that were awarded to the state of California for on-the-job training activities. Most of this will go for training out-of-work individuals who've exhausted their unemployment insurance benefits. This is the 3rd award to the city. We've had a series of awards. We've increased in each award. The funding was provided to us in increments. This is the 3rd increment. It brings our total to $1.3 million. We have one provider that will be providing these services. We used to have 2, which was the Housing Authority. We conducted an RFP when we got the initial award. Managed Career Solutions in Hollywood is actually the premier provider of OJT services in the entire system. They won the bid with the Housing Authority. We chose to focus on Managed Career Solutions to lead the way. They did the best in terms of providing OJT services, so we've contracted with Managed Career Solutions, and they are providing the services with this $500,000 as well, and they were involved in the 2 other rounds with the Housing Authority, but they've performed well. We think they can serve the most amount of people, and we used a procurement to procure them, Mr. Chair. I may want to add anything?
So couple of things. What, I know you alluded to before, what percentage are we up to in training overall of the percentage at this point, dollars that we spend?
Actually, we've gone from 4% years ago to the point where we've convinced, we were actually spearheaded the drive with the state to actually impose requirements on training. The current training is 25% of all we have formula funds have to be spent on training. That'll go up in increments as we continue throughout the years. Next year it'll go through 30%. Of course, it includes a leverage requirement. So during your tenure as chair, we've made some progress over the years, both as chairman of the council as well as chairman of this committee. We've gone from 4% to 25%. We'll be going up to 30% of all our money is being used for training.
And this one was not one in which MCS applied for it separately and brought to the city. This was one which the city applied.
Well, we applied.
HACLA had, and then put the RFP out.
Yes, and then we had our own competition locally to select 2 providers. We based our decision on going with MCS after the first 2 increments to select MCS because it's a small amount of money now at $500,000. They did the best job in terms of producing the higher numbers, so we're going with them on the last $500,000.
And what are the outcome metrics we're expecting from this program? I know who we're going to serve. Do we have any goals set for the outcomes?
Yes, in the report, it identifies that we had started off with a requirement to the state of 50 individuals to be served with the first increment. We actually established our goals at 100 individuals to be served. That's why we picked 2 agencies.
So it was an additional 100 or just 100 total? It was an additional 50? Okay.
It went from 50 to 100 in the initial round, and then we're adding an additional number of participants to this grant. The performance outcomes are basically the same as the Workforce Investment Act requirements, so we're looking at intern-employment, earnings after placement, and then retention after placement. What is unique about this is this is focused exclusively on on-the-job training. We know that this particular training modality has the best outcomes for participants, primarily because they're hired, and then subsequently they're trained to fill the skills gaps in terms of their level and what the employer requires.
So in plain English, walk us through how that would happen. So somebody who's been unemployed, who's either low income, been unemployed for 21, 47 weeks, or 99 weeks and is exhausted, goes in, they get a kind of temporary placement in a work environment where they then get training there. Like, what would an example of that be?
So what would happen is an individual would come in, would be assessed. They would determine what the particular skill levels are. They would have an employer on the back end who would say, well, this is the skills that we need. There's a gap. And we will hire that individual, and we will provide the on-the-job training to the individual to address the skills gap. Once that individual has fulfilled the skills gap, the employer could ask for reimbursement for the extraordinary cost of the training and the supervision.
So this is the employers reaching out saying, we'll hire, we'll keep, we'll train, you cover our training.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Up to 90%, so it's an actual hire, and up to 90% of reimbursement to the employer for
And how-
training that individual on the job.
And how do employers find out about this?
Well, we've got a marketing plan. We do have relationships between work source centers and employers. And MCS has been very good at maintaining those relationships. And as you know, at your direction, we've identified those industry sectors that have the greatest potential for growth, and our system's focusing on those industry sectors because they produce living wage jobs.
Right.
So we've identified the occupations and the industries that we want to focus on.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll go forward then with number 2 as also a recommendation from the chair. And if Mr. Labange comes, we'll add him to those. And yeah, we exhausted that. We did 2 and 3 together. So, all right, thank you very much. Let's now go to item 1. And I'd like to actually take public comment on number 1 first. So
Sure.
if you guys don't mind stepping back for a second.
Yeah.
Like to, sorry? The report's been made public here. I'm gonna ask for comments first. I'll hold your card if you'd like to first, Mr. Sachs, and you can speak after, but I'll take the other cards then ahead of time. Steve Renahan, if you'd like to come on forward. After Steve, actually and all 3 can come up to the table right now. Blas Villalobos is also with us, and and also Mario Pabon. And I think those are their own cards. So if all 3 of you guys want to come on up, you can be at the table. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson Garcetti. My name's Steve Renahan. I work for Shelter Partnership here in Los Angeles. Shelter Partnership's been working to end homelessness in Los Angeles for some 27 years. One of the most vexing problems in working on homelessness is homeless veterans, especially now when the situation has the potential to become much worse with the returning veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq. Employment opportunities are one of the many services that returning veterans need, and certainly homeless veterans or veterans at risk of homelessness need. Coordination with the other services they need is crucial. So we applaud you for bringing forward this coordinator position and urge you to make an important focus of that position, strategically working with the VA and the nonprofit service providers who work on homeless issues among veterans to make sure that this is an opportunity for homeless veterans in LA and at risk of homeless veterans in LA. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Steve, very much. Blas.
Morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. How you doing?
Nice to see you again.
You too.
Nice to see everybody. So my name is Blas Villalobos. I am the Community Programs Manager for U.S. Vets. Just a short history on U.S. Vets. U.S. Vets has been providing services to the veteran population for 20 years now. Not just here in California, but nationwide, 11 sites. We are about to open our 12th site in Washington, D.C. I'm here to support the creation of the Veterans Affairs Coordinator position. As you guys know, with Afghanistan war ending soon and thousands of veterans coming back to the LA area, a lot of these veterans are going to be facing the same problems that my generation faced. Unemployment, substance abuse, homelessness. We're going to have veterans dealing with mental health issues. There are a number of different agencies in the LA area that provide services to this population. But having a position, the coordinator position within the mayor's office, will allow all the agencies to work together a lot more closely, not just with the VA, but with each other in order to provide the services. We have Patriotic Hall, which should be open hopefully by the summer time. We're going to have a number of agencies moving into Patriotic Hall. The main purpose of this will be to provide services to all these veterans. Now, having someone such as a coordinator within the mayor's office will make it a lot easier for all these agencies to work together. There are a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and having someone who can represent the mayor on these issues and who can talk to the VA along with all the other nonprofits will definitely expedite the process and shine some light onto some of these issues which are desperately in need of being addressed.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and thank you for your great work. Very, very much appreciate it. Mario?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you kindly for this opportunity to speak today. I appreciate explaining a little bit about what we do, and certainly in the support of the new coordinator position, I think is just a fantastic move in the right direction. For us, we're a nonprofit organization. In
Tell everybody who you are, because it says it on the card, but you didn't tell everybody else, so tell everybody who you are.
I'm Mario Pabon, president of Empower America Coalition. We're a nonprofit organization here in Southern California. Started working with Riverside County to pass the Valor Act there, and we've now here in Los Angeles to promote the same. What we do is twofold. One is, like many organizations, we do the recruiting and training of service veterans to get them on a career path, but in particular, renewable energy career paths. But the second part of what we do is actually get involved in originating and developing solar projects with municipalities and the private sector at a commercial level. So we want to make sure that we're recruiting, we're training, and we're employing. We think the last part of that is really the biggest part of putting this together. So working hand in hand with your coordinators, it would be extremely important. We can be a resource for economic development, for local workforce development, and just in general a supportive coalition partners from financing to technology professionals. So we look forward to the opportunity and in great support of the coordinator position.
Great. Thank you, Mario.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'll say a few more words about that in a moment. If I can ask staff to come forward as they're coming forward. So this was a brainchild of a number of us who were looking at the sacrifices that have been made by the city in the ongoing war in Afghanistan and the previous war in Iraq, that we had the most veterans coming out of Los Angeles area, certainly the most sacrifices made by veterans, both in casualties and lost lives here. But those who have returned come back wounded in all sorts of ways and needing to better integrate into civilian life. I think because they were shorter wars and clearer wars sometimes in the past, we've seen after World War II, the city stepped up when veterans came and camped out in what was still then Westlake Park, but became MacArthur Park, to say they needed housing, and the city stepped up and built the housing that allowed the greatest generation to be able to have that dignity and respect. My grandfather was one of those who returned from war in the Pacific Theater here in Los Angeles to create his life and for his family afterwards. We've seen in other wars, worst responses certainly after Vietnam. A lot of returning veterans felt not only that those services weren't there, but that even the American public didn't embrace them coming home from war. I think we've turned that around certainly, and this country is very grateful in its rhetoric and in its feelings to our returning veterans. It's now time for the city to also act upon those feelings. And I want to say a couple things just at the outset, because I always wonder as a council member looking back on all sorts of things that were created in this city, what were they thinking? What did they want? Why was that decision made versus this one? And as a person helping put this forward, I want to speak a little bit about the intent behind it and some of the hopes that we have. One is that we see this hopefully as something which is a medium-term temporary position, but a long-term permanent initiative. The position right now, because of our need to act quickly, I think we're looking at doing this inside the WIB and looking through workforce investment, but it's part of a larger initiative for the city to have a presence for our veterans who will have ongoing needs for decades to come. Secondly, the idea is not to create new turf, but to make sure the city doesn't guard its veterans' work as something that is its own and has to be protected and guarded, but something that is collaborative. So, for instance, when you're talking about going into, Patriotic Hall, which is a county facility, of course, we should be working side by side, hand in glove, together, because we need to think about this veterans up, not bureaucracy down. And so I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for us to leverage federal, state, county work and the nonprofit sector together. And I hope that the city can be that catalyst to make sure that communication occurs, not to say, hey, this is the City of LA's Veterans Program, and if you don't fit into our box, go someplace else, and vice versa. It's also not our intention to duplicate existing work that is out there. But at the same time, there is a lot of work not being done by the city in our housing programs, in our workforce investment programs, which is job training and job placement, and in a host of other areas as well. So the idea behind this is to try to bring that together. I do think long-term this is an important position to have the authority of the mayor's office with funding from WIB and other places, but the importance of doing this and really looking at jobs right now, which is so critical, and trying to marry that with some of the good work that's going on the ground with social work, which can help bring the services that people need in order to keep and retain a job, is the vision behind it right now. So that's the idea. Why don't we hear the CLA report, and we'll discuss it from there.
Good morning, Felipe Chavez with the CLA's office. Before you is a CLA report relative to the establishment of a Veteran Affairs Coordinator position within the city. On November 2nd, 2012, the council adopted motion Garcetti-Rosendahl instructing our office to work with CDD, the CAO, and LASA, and to report with the required council actions to create a Veteran Affairs Coordinator position, including position authority, budgetary actions, and recommended department in which to house the position. The motion also instructed CDD to work with the Workforce Investment Board and to report to council with the recommended service level for veteran services within the WorkSource Center system, and with a recommendation for co-locating specialized military social workers within the WorkSource Centers. This report contains input from CDD, the CAO, LASA, the Personnel Department, the LA Veterans Collaborative, and information provided by the American Community Survey, U.S. Census. Statistics show that in 2011, of the 330,000 veterans in LA County, 10% were unemployed and 12% were homeless. According to LASA, of the 23,000 homeless individuals in the city, 3,200 were veterans in 2011. The LA Veterans Collaborative reports that in 2014, nearly 30,000 veterans are expected to return to California, with the majority returning to Southern California from military service. Many may not only face difficulty finding employment and housing, but also face problems accessing mental health services, educational opportunities, military benefits, and other resources. While the city has provided services to veterans in the past in the form of workforce development services, housing services, funding to outside agencies for veterans supportive services, our office has determined that a more dedicated coordinated approach that serves as a single point of contact would be beneficial to more effectively deliver services to veterans. We concur with CDD's recommendation to establish a position with CDD that would be partially funded with WIA funds for workforce-related activities and partially funded with other sources to address non-workforce-related activities such as housing, business development, mental health, education, and access to military benefits and other resources. We also support CD's recommendations to establish a 10% service level target for veteran services and to require the integration of military social workers in the upcoming WorkSource Center RFP. As provided by CDD, the proposed Veteran Affairs Coordinator would be responsible for developing a comprehensive strategy to address the needs of veterans, advocating on behalf of veterans, preparing and developing legislation related to veterans, and addressing the needs of disabled veterans and other vulnerable veteran populations. We recommend that the CAO be instructed to identify a funding source to expand the scope of the VAC beyond allowable workforce development activities and to further define the tasks and responsibilities of the VAC. Lastly, we recommend that the council request the mayor's office to include funding for the proposed VAC position in the fiscal year 2013-2014 mayor's budget.
Mr. Harris, you wanna-
Mr. Chairman, I want to commend you for introducing this and explain, well, I don't have to explain to you, but the genesis of this was basically that those who serve our country and we're beholden to should have special attention. Now, we do serve vets, but we include them among all of the hard-to-serve populations within the workforce development system. This will single them out for special attention. We think this is a good first step. If I can speak for you, I remember your intent was to create a position actually within the executive office that would span just CDD. But this is a good first step. We are now designating someone within CDD with a dedicated funding source, and we'll come back with that and we'll advise you of that, to handle veteran services so that we can remove them from the pot of all of those who need special attention and single them out for special attention within our system. More needs to be done, and I think within these recommendations and with your motion, it speaks to that in terms of what New York and Chicago do, all departments should contribute to some sort of position within the executive's office where we have a unified plan for the entire city for veteran service delivery and the receipt of city services. Want to add anything to that, Jaime?
There are a number of other areas in which we do some veteran services, vouchers in the housing areas, most notable about them, which are veterans housing vouchers to help people access housing in the city. I think I've shared before that half of the veterans who are attending school at LACC, for just one example, are homeless, and that might not be on the street homeless, but it's in a shelter or in a car or someplace else. And I think that's a place too where we need to look at coordination between us and housing/HACLA to bring that together. Are there any areas, either CLA or anything, Mr. Irish, you can think about where we can greater coordinate? I mean, our family source centers, some of the other places where we touch people's lives, where we can look at the full range of services. I know one of the things we've done is taken some funds to work with public counsel to help veterans access the benefits that they weren't receiving. I'd love, obviously, for anybody at the workforce centers to be able to, workforce centers, to be able to say, hey, by the way, are you getting all your benefits? If not, refer them, immediately to public counsel or to others. Are there any other places where you can think of holes of coordination?
Yeah, I think within your motion, and we've, again, interpreted the intent to expand it throughout our system. Family source centers, for instance, that serve entire families, and even in our work source system. So we're going to go beyond this because of your motion, and we're going to talk about veterans' families having preferences in the work source center system. The wives of veterans who are often forgotten, the children of veterans.
And husbands.
Yeah, and the husbands. So those family members, we think, are deserving of the same sort of preferential treatment in our family source system and in our work source system as well, not just the veteran himself or herself, but also their family members. And when you talk about other coordination, I think this motion will be the impetus for us approaching the community college districts. Mm-hmm. As you know, there are proprietary schools that have been singled out by the president for abuses in terms of getting veterans to sign up for training programs, spending exorbitant amounts of money and not leading to a job nor a certificate or degree. Mm-hmm. We're hoping that maybe we can talk to our providers, and the dominant provider of job training services for our system are the community colleges, that they could establish veterans reps in community colleges to facilitate their enrollment in schools and their access to classes and their access to veterans jobs benefits and Pell Grants, et cetera, to facilitate their education. So we think this is an initial first step that gives us some direction, but it also speaks again to having within the executive branch one person that can come up with a plan that we could all develop for the entire city, be it recreational services and rec and parks or workforce development services or under economic development in terms of business services and veterans having access to contracts, et cetera. So this is a good beginning. I think this sets the stage for us.
Will you be looking at hiring this from somebody existing, or is this something that's a new position that we're going to be advertising out? How would this occur?
We're going to have a dedicated person perform that now. We didn't have the benefit of that. We do have the presence of someone who is a former vet who is going to handle these affairs, but his duties included other things. Mm-hmm. Because of this motion, and we didn't have a person dedicated to it. It will establish a dedicated person beginning July 1st. We'll heap some duties on that individual now, but beginning July 1st, that will be the sole responsibility of someone in the department. Without this motion, we would not have done that. And it's... You want to stand up?
Come on up, so we can all get to know you. Come on at the table.
Come on up and join us.
Why don't you introduce yourself? We've got some veterans groups here as well that, as you heard, testify, and I want to...
Chairman, my name is Michael Wynn, and I am a Vietnam-era veteran, and I'm also a member of the Community Development Department.
What service?
Army.
All right. Got any Army in the house here? Got a couple here. Tell me a little bit about your experience serving veterans right now and some of the ideas you might have with this position.
Well, right now, I am a monitor for the work source centers. Mm-hmm. And basically what we do is we service the veterans through the work source centers. And it's been my responsibility to make sure that the work source centers serve the veterans in any capacity they need. So it's really open for the veterans to come in right now, especially Gold Card. And that's where we are.
So you've been doing compliance work with the centers at this point mostly? Okay.
Absolutely.
So you'll be wearing a new hat of both compliance, but also now programmatic.
This is what I'm
work
told.
as well. This is what I'm told.
Yeah,
What you volunteered
Mr.
for,
Chair,
Nicole.
our intent is to dedicate Michael totally to veterans' services. Again, without this motion, we would not have had that. Michael had other responsibilities. We'll be taking away one workload, but giving him another. Also, Jaime has done some research on a number of veterans grants. It'll be Michael's job to put together our applications for going after those grants with a team of folks. So we think we'll bring additional resources to the city as well. In terms of the other aspects of your motion, we're going to proceed with dealing with USC to provide social workers who are actually trained in dealing with veterans
Good.
in our workforce centers.
And
We're
Mr.
also
Hassan is working with you?
Yes, we're working with SC. Again, we'll have to open that up to competition, but there's no one else, no other university in the country other than SC that does that, so we're assuming they'll be competitive in whatever process. And before this, we did not, and because of your motion, we did not have a specific service goal for veterans. So 10% of the Worksource Center contracts of all of our 18 Worksource Centers, they will have to come in with their population. The goal will be serving, in terms of their overall service objectives, 10% will have to be veterans.
That may be the biggest takeaway piece of news today in this room. I mean, as we build other things, I like metrics, I like goals, but to drive that, that's going to require some serious work on behalf of all of our workforce providers, and I think it's a great goal. And, you know, those folks who are working with veterans in the room help us get that, because for some of them, they're going to have that experience more deeply. Other ones, it's going to be newer, but we want to make sure that is happening across the board, and we appreciate that very much. And don't worry, Mike, if you've served in the military, you know that you get volunteered for things all the time you don't
Absolutely.
ask for. I remember my uncle was serving on the Kitty Hawk, and he was asked, there's a big announcement, anybody here a musician? And he actually played the cello, and he was all excited he was going to get to play. And so he raised his hand, nobody else did. He said, all right, good, go move the piano. So you never know what you'll be volunteered for. And it might not be exactly what you're trained for initially, but by the end, you certainly know it. Well, this is great, and I would ask one thing to the recommendation, the CLA report. I'd like to, as a sixth recommendation, request the mayor's office to not just include funding for the proposed position, but to look at creating a veterans coordinator position in the mayor's office. Now, initially, that can be even a person funded through the Workforce Investment Board, and think about that. But obviously, I want one point of contact, whether it's going to be even looking at policy issues, whether it's going to be looking at coordinating and things that are going on at other levels, the county and state veterans work, and a point of contact for the VA here locally. So I think our emphasis will definitely be in the short term on jobs, and as we look in the longer term, I'd like the mayor's office to consider that in their budget this year to create that position.
Mr. Chair, Washington has done that. They did that, the city of Washington, D.C., did that a year ago, and they require departments to contribute to funding that position within the executive's office.
Yeah, that may be a good way to do it inside the, housing, CDD, trying to think through what other departments. I mean, certainly police and fire have an interest there, because we've been doing a lot of hiring of veterans and have a lot of veterans who return
Personnel would be
there as well. So, and personnel, yeah. Okay, but let's request the mayor's office. We don't instruct ever the mayor's office. Request the mayor's office to do that. Okay. And anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can I tell you that what to expect from us within the next 2 or 3 weeks?
Please.
We've received a $14 million grant, and I want to commend Jaime Pacheco, who led the drive for this. We'll be coming back to you with $14 million more for workforce development activities. Most of that money will be distributed to our Worksource Centers. We'll give you the plan for that to serve dislocated workers. And as you know, our unemployment rate, California ranks 3rd in the nation in unemployment. LA, of course, has a phenomenal unemployment rate when you compare us to other jurisdictions. We'll be coming back to you with a plan for an additional $14 million that we
That's
competed
competitive?
for.
So it's competitive?
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
So Jaime's kind of like my Larry H. Parker.
Yeah,
you know?
he's been the rainmaker for
He got
us
me
recently, so I want to
$14
commend him for
million.
that.
Good.
So you'll see that from us within a week or so, but we'll look forward to scheduling it as soon as possible.
Okay, great. We'll come. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I was expecting Mr. Labange, but while we are waiting him, Mr. Sachs wanted to speak after the report. If you want to come forward on item number 1, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Arnold Sachs. First, I'd like to read a newspaper story. This is from 12/11/12. Homelessness in the U.S. continues to decline. Veterans Affairs Secretary Eric K. Shinsky said the government had been building momentum and remained on track to meet the 2015 target. And he was talking about the target for ending homelessness among veterans. And I'm concerned, because I didn't hear any discussion here regarding this position, and the county Chamber of Commerce initiative to end homelessness, where the Chamber of Commerce is involved with county to end veteran homelessness. That's a program that was started over a year ago. The City Council acted in October and November. 7 or 8 months later, the county acted November 20th, 2012 to create a classification for Chief Deputy Military and Veterans Affairs for the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. So I'm wondering why the holdup. The gentleman mentioned back in 2011 there was quite a few homeless veterans prior to this initiative involving the Chamber of Commerce and the city and the county and whoever else you want to call onto that bandwagon. There's nobody here from the Chamber of Commerce to discuss that program and how this would overlap with that and what would happen with the overlapping. And in addition, it mentions military veterans. There's been a lot of stories in the newspaper, and I don't know if any of funding or any money could be committed towards the innumerable accounts that you're hearing about of female service members being assaulted by training. So I was wondering if you could maybe put an amendment in this action to have some program available for them to get the medical or psychological help they may need to overcome that disability that occurred while they were serving the country.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. And I know that USC, the social workers, that is a part of their training, and that would be included, so having these social workers on site would be able to address that from the full range of issues that veterans face, including our female veterans who have too often experienced that. All right, I guess that will close item number 1. We'll pass, as amended, the CLA recommendation as a report as a recommendation from the chair. We do have general public comment, which is for items not on today's agenda, but under our jurisdiction. Mr. Sachs, did you want to say anything on that too? Filled out a card.
Thank you. And very quick, Arnold Sachs, very quickly, the article mentioned that the federal government will be allocating $300 million to grant programs to provide veterans and their families with support services, which is up $100 million from 2012. So I'm just concerned about the amount of money that's coming out there. But as far as public comment, there's 2 stories here that I wanted to bring up. One was Gordon Brush Factory expansion tied up in red tape, and the gentleman goes on to talk about how he has no idea, and it was mentioned about the economic, what the heck are they called? The zone, free enterprise zones, in the economic zones. He wanted to locate his business, and he had to go to, found out at a conference in Cleveland about economic zones in California. So there was a mention about programs that are available through Workforce Investment Board and the funding that businesses who want to do business in LA could find out about these programs. Well, if a business wants to do business in, and you may do a survey on this, in LA, where would they rank as far as doing business? They're visiting the Workforce Investment Board before they got permits and anything else that would be required for their business. Where would they rank visiting the Workforce Investment Board to find out about outside programs that might assist their business? Or would they go to the licensing agencies, the bureaus, whatever is necessary, to check with them to find out about licensing? And would it not serve a better purpose to put the information regarding hiring incentives that are available from the city in that situation where a person goes to get a license? Oh, and by the way, if you go through this program that you can find out here, you may be able to cut your training costs, your hiring costs, this cost. So while you're getting a permit, you're finding out about the different programs within the city.
It's a good suggestion.
Getting your permits, and then, okay, I got my permit.
Thank you,
taken
Mr.
care of,
Sachs.
Go out and look for business.
That's a good suggestion. I'll look into it. They may do that, but if they do not, it's a good suggestion. I'll pass it on. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, this meeting is adjourned.
So you started off